All right, thank you very much, Rosemary. Just some ground rules, 50-minute segments, 50 minutes of school board, 10-minute break, as I'm old and I need to have some relief every once in a while. I'm going to ask some questions the first part, and then I hope to divide it evenly to where you will have the chance to ask questions as well. Please do us a favor. Ask a question, don't filibuster, and don't make statements, please. Because I'll give you about 30 seconds, and then, if you're still going, I may say, can we cut this off? And then if that doesn't work, we'll leg wrestle up here. So. And you're all lucky, you're going to get to see my best side, and that's my back. So they have the candidates will have 2 minutes to answer, and each have a minute opening statement. So without further ado, we'll start off with our school board candidates, and Mark will go with you first.
Folks, thanks for coming out tonight. My name is Mark Vandre. For this 1 minute, just a quick biography for you. I'm 55 years old, almost 56 if you want to celebrate my birthday pretty soon. My wife and I have been married 33 years. We've lived in Salina about 10 years. We have 2 sons. The oldest boy turns 29 in a few weeks. The youngest just turned 25. One of them graduated from college here in town. The other a Salina South graduate. I've worked for private colleges professionally for 35 years. Currently, I serve at Bethany. I'm both the registrar and the director of financial aid. I worked at Kansas Wesleyan for 4 years as well, and over the course of time, 4 other colleges, some in Ohio, some in Arkansas. We've been around a little bit. But again, 10 years here in Salina. It's been a pleasure to be on the school board the last 4 years, and as I've told some folks, I get 1 vote. Some folks agree with it, some folks don't. But I assure you, I listen to everybody. Part of the reason I know Carol's name is we've emailed a ton along the way. And again, we don't always agree, but that's fine. We all voice our opinion, do the best we can to try and help others. That's my thought on it, and appreciate you coming out tonight.
Okay, Scott.
Oh, you're not going to need the full minute.
Yes.
I'm Scott Gardner. I was actually born in Kansas City, moved here when I was young. My mom actually grew up here in Salina and brought us back here from Kansas City because she thought Kansas City was not the best place to raise kids. So I grew up here, went through 305 system. I and my sister, all 3 of my kids have gone through the 305 system and graduated, went off to college. They're all still here, grandkids are here. So most of you know me. I've worked with some of you through Raytheon Beechcraft, and I'm at the city now and been on the school board for 4 years, so that's it.
Good evening. I'm Paul Gebhardt, and I was born here in Salina. Went through the Salina school system, graduated from Salina South in 1992, where I joined the Navy. Went in the Navy, spent 24 years in the Navy. Traveled the earth, and spent a lot of the time at sea, and a lot of time on overseas. Outside of that, I moved back here after retirement from the Navy, and then went to K-State Salina at the Polytechnic campus as a professional pilot and UAS engineering technology student. And while I was there, I was a tutor in the writing center. And outside that, I'm here to run for the sake of paying back to my community.
I'm Ann Zimmerman. I am on the school board. I grew up in Salina. I went to Hughesner and South and then to K-State for a degree in elementary education. Later, I went to Harvard for a law degree, and then I came back to Kansas. For the past 23 years, I've been in Salina, and I've been on the school board for 2 terms. I hope you'll elect me again, so you need to know who I am. I'm a professional mediator. I get people together who disagree with each other, who may not like each other at all, and I help them reach agreement. That's my main job. I'm also a singer-songwriter. Most years I sing about 100 gigs, including many in Salina schools through the Salina Arts and Humanities. I want Salina to be a great place to live, not just a place to pass through on your way to somewhere else. I want it to be a great place to grow up and a great place to stay, or a great place to move to, or move back to after you've lived somewhere else. Thank you.
Okay, I think Ann will just have you hang on to the microphone there. For my benefit, we'll go back and forth. Yeah, they'll get two now. Okay, question number one. If you are elected to a 4-year term on the Board of Education in November, in your opinion, what is something that you see as a positive in local education and something that is a concern to you in local education over the next 4 years? Ann?
Say the second part again?
What is something you see as a positive in local education, and what is something that concerns you on local education in the next 4
Okay,
years?
thank you. And I have 2 minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we have a big initiative this year that's called Visible Learning. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's looking at research of all the things that teachers do. Almost everything teachers do positively affects learning for the students, but there are certain things they do that have a bigger positive influence on student learning. And this is a study of that, and the books on it, we are training our teachers on it now, thanks to our great superintendent, Lynn Exline, and the people are seeing what really works. And so if you've got a choice of 2 or 3 possibilities for teaching methods, and you can use the one that works better than any of them, that's what you want to do, because the teachers all want the kids to learn. That's one of our big strengths this year, positive things. One of the big challenges now has become chronic absenteeism. And there have been so many students since the pandemic, it was somewhat of a problem before, but even more now, that are absent more than 10% of the year. And maybe up to 40% of our students are absent that much of the year. And so we have started an effort to talk to the parents, to call them, not just wait till they're way truant, but to call the parents, to check with the families, and do our very best to get those kids back in school, because when they're not there, they are losing out. And the more they're gone, the harder it is to catch up. Thank you.
Paul, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay. What is something in the next 4 years you see as a positive in local education, while at the same time, what might be a concern about local education?
Well, I think that we have adequate funding for what we've done. We have, over the last 20 years, increased twofold our amount of funding available. So looking at that, it's a matter of how we spend that so that we can avoid having problems with retaining good teachers, quality teachers, and ensuring that those funds are used for the appropriate reasons. Where we might spend on infrastructure or ancillary items, it comes down to the teachers and their function that really is the big one, and that's been a problem for a while already, making sure that we have good quality teachers.
Scott?
Well, I think one of the positive things is that the system that we're in right now with USD 305 is we're not afraid to change. As we learn more, we adapt, we make changes as necessary. As a master black belt in continuous improvement, that's the thing that we always have to be ready to do, is modify what we're doing and change it in order to reach the goals that we're trying to reach. If we're doing something and it isn't working, we need to stop doing it as quickly as possible, change courses, and adapt a new policy. The thing that's a big concern, as far as I'm concerned, is the funding that we're supposed to get from the state, i.e. for special education. Those numbers are drastically underfunded. And because of that, we have to take money from other areas to help fund those events, those efforts. And so, to me, we have to make sure that we're able to get the funding necessary in order to do the things necessary to educate the kids.
Make sure we don't hamstring anybody here in the microphone. So positive for me, I come from a family that's always valued education. I have a doctorate in educational leadership. My brothers are both lawyers. My parents are both college graduates. 3 of my 4 grandparents went to college. So I come from that perspective. But Jim Fletcher, the current board president, he and I have talked a lot about the different ways people become contributing members of the community. And one of the really, really cool things about what USD 305 does is all the diverse ways we prepare people for whatever it is they want to do. I mean, you can leave Salina South or Salina Central with a welding certificate from Salina Tech. You can join the military. We prepare people in a lot of different ways. And part of the reason we're able to be successful in all the different offerings for those over many years of leadership from our predecessors on the board, from Mrs. Exline and her predecessors and the superintendent and the great things teachers have done, is we've planned ahead financially. You don't see this a lot unless you very carefully study the budget that we put out each year, but Salina's school districts are in great shape financially. They have adequate savings, they have a master plan for making sure the facilities are well taken care of. For me, it's a real honor to be able to help shepherd that budget through the process. That's one of the key things the board does, is help keep an eye on the wheel financially, and it's just great that we're in such good shape that way. As far as negatives, I want to echo the 2 things that Ann and Scott both said. Getting kids to come to school is a real challenge. Part of that stems from poverty in the community. We have a number of families that just struggle with how do I get from A to B each day. And when we talked about a student recently where the family can't afford the gas money to get them there, but they're within the 2.5-mile range where we're allowed to do busing. So how to solve some of those problems. And I think one of the things we can do that I hope to work on if re-elected is figuring out better ways to help inform our state and federal elected officers. The special education funding is a problem, without a doubt, and there's other things that come up financially that we'll talk about along the way. So, close to time. Carol's smiling at me. On to the next one.
Many parents, especially after the pandemic, learned about public education, and some chose to put their kids into private schools or other ways of learning. How do you win back parents and students that may have left the public school system to go into private schools or the homeschooling?
You go next. That's right. So great question. Obviously, the pandemic disrupted a lot of things. That was not a fun time for anybody in any stretch of the imagination. And families make choices, and that's what it's all about. I want to make sure that every family has the ability to make a choice about the best place they want to go to school, whether that's private school, public school. I want to make sure that Salina schools put their best foot forward on that. I think many of you have seen or heard over the last 1.5 years, I think 2 years now, and we've been doing some pretty extensive marketing programs. We actually hired an outside firm to do some studies of why did people leave the school system, what things did we potentially do to get them back. I'm sure you're aware the state legislature has recently made it possible where students from other communities could choose to come go to school here if they want to. That has pros and cons as well. One of the things we're worried about in the district is right now if somebody from, I don't know, Solomon wanted to send their kid to Salina, they could more or less choose which building they want to go to. If they pick our building that already has full seats, is that fair to people that are within district? You have to go to the neighborhood school that you live in. So try to find parity in some of those things is interesting. But again, going back to the marketing study, we've tried to help make sure people know what the outcomes are from Salina schools. Make sure they know that our teachers are wonderful people that are doing great work within the limited finances that we're able to use to pull everything together. So I think I'll stop there.
I would agree with Mark that the marketing study is powerful, but one of the things that I think we really need to be concerned about is are we actually being meaningfully unique to our children and to the families? So are we giving them exactly what they need in order to be successful? The only way we can do that is we got to find out what they deem to be of importance. So it's not about what we think or what we want, it's about being able to deliver what's necessary in order for them to be successful. And so as long as we're being meaningfully unique for what our community and what our people are asking for, I think that's the job that we're really striving to do, because it's not about what we've got. We've all got our degrees and we've moved on. We've got to make sure that the generation coming behind us is able to be as successful, if not more.
Repose that question.
Yeah, how do public schools win back parents who may have opted out for homeschooling or private schools?
Okay, and on this one here, it kind of goes back to what I was just saying. I think that a lot of the pandemic brought on a lot of challenges that people weren't capable of getting past. it put challenges on the school systems and the educational systems that they weren't able to get past. And I think that getting them what they need, just like Scott said, as a matter of fact, the unique taught lessons and information, the foundational skills is going to be the critical piece that we need to be able to get together. Because after the pandemic, we're going to have years before we actually truly see how much impact that actually made on everything we're having to deal with now. And then making changes through each of these events and getting past this, it's going to be time before it all comes out in the wash. So getting us to that point, I think is going to be the biggest challenge.
How to win students back to public schools. Well, some parents learned during the pandemic how hard it is to educate children, and they were happy to have the kids go back to public schools, and we were happy to have them. I hope that people can get good information about public schools in Salina, about us, about USD 305, Salina Public Schools. There's a lot of innuendo out there that you hear about public schools, which is not based on facts in our district. If you're hearing bad things about public schools, you might want to take a visit to a public school and find out how hard those teachers are working and how engaged those students are, how much they're learning. And there is a lot of learning gap from the time that the pandemic was going on, and they're working very hard to make up that gap. I am concerned about kids who are spending their high school years and even their middle school years working online. So much of middle school and high school, we all remember, was about social interaction. And you learn so much there now. Not all social action at middle school and high school is positive, but neither is social interaction anywhere. You learn to navigate things that you would never come close to learning if you're just doing things online. So the marketing study is good. We hope that the information gets out there, that people read it, that people hear it, and get good information about our district, and that they will make wise choices, which I think the wisest choice is almost always to go to public schools.
Yeah, what I'm hearing from especially the school board members and Paul, please, how does the school board balance quality education, the need for funding quality education, while at the same time being concerned about local taxpayer burden? So Ann, we'll start with you and go back that way.
Balance the funding with the taxpayer.
Yeah, how do you provide a quality education at the same time respond to local taxpayers and their concerns about tax burdens?
Much of our school district money comes from the state, and there's a 20 mil levy that's all across the state. And districts that have a very rich tax base, which would be including Johnson County schools and maybe like some oil well schools out in western Kansas, they have lots and lots of income from that 20 mils, and other school districts have very little value in their property taxes in their district, and that money is tried to spread evenly across the state to, I mean not evenly, but to compensate for those differences. And so already there's a sharing of that part of the tax burden among the whole state, so that you don't get a poor education because you live in one zip code, a great education because you live in another. So some of that is evened out already. Like Mark mentioned, we have an extremely well planned out budget that has planning for all our roof replacements and concrete replacements, and so we do our very best to use every single dollar in a way that's not going to hit us up with an emergency spending that we need to grab money from our local taxpayers that wasn't planned. So I think we're doing a really good job using the taxpayer money.
I think that the best way to sum it up is verifying that we're doing right by all of the students and the teachers and the community on a whole by looking into the cost-benefit analysis or return on investment, making sure that the way that the tax money is being spent is being yielded back to the people through evidentiary findings, i.e. grades. Making sure that the grades are up to snuff as a measure. And the other side of it is making sure that we don't have anything sitting and nothing not being used. If we have investments into things that are not being utilized, then we need to trim the fat because that's costing the taxpayers more money there in its own. So in short, it literally just needs to be assessed by an actual measurable method. Let's read it.
Did we go out and find the shortest chairs?
I switched with this guy.
I think it's a tall table.
I'm wondering if I'm going to get up. For me, it comes back to education. It comes back to educating our adult citizens as to how mill levies and all of that actually works and the revenue neutral rate, what it actually equivalates to. Because even while we're not revenue neutral, the average increase was probably going to affect somebody about $9 or $10. And so we hear these numbers, but we really don't understand how the numbers actually work. And even working for the city, that's what I do is I look at numbers all day and I find ways and find different methods to save money and to reduce costs. And so I think the biggest thing we have to do is first understand how the money's being spent and what it actually equivalates to. And then we might realize it's really not that big of a number actually, just depending on if your taxes have gone up. If your taxes don't go up, it doesn't affect you at all. And so what you're actually looking at is we're actually going to get revenues from different things that were not on the tax basis at that particular year, but now they are. You know, where we give businesses tax incentives, we didn't get any money from them because we returned it back to them. Well, now that those incentives are gone, now we will tax them and that money will come in. If we say we're not, that money won't come in anymore. And so we try to do things to get businesses to come to Salina. When that time is up, we have to go back and start to recoup so that we can do things for new businesses coming to Salina. But if we never change that tax thing, then we will never see that growth and we will not be able to get businesses to come in because we won't have the money to put into the system.
There's pros to going first in this order and pros to going last as well. But these guys have all given great answers to it. I want to tell you a quick story on this. My father-in-law has been on the school board in Garnett, where he lives, for 36 years, believe it or not. This is his last year. He was on the school board when the Wolf Creek nuclear power plant was built in Burlington. And one of the fun things for Garnett at that time, fun said in quotes, was a lot of the workers doing the work in Burlington lived in Garnett. So the kids were going to school there. At that time, some of the revenue neutral things Diane was talking about, where the mill levy dollars are equitably spread across the state, it wasn't done quite the same. So Burlington had these beautiful schools that Wolf Creek ultimately funded, but the workers were all living in Garnett, which didn't get some of that revenue. So there's some history behind why the dollars are better spread out, better allocated across the state. And I hope that we keep doing that. Part of that comes from one of the answers earlier about helping to educate the folks in Topeka and Washington about how they make decisions on these. How does the decision they make there affect the local schools? Now, Scott mentioned earlier about the special ed not being adequately funded. I don't remember the exact percentage, but it's something like 62% of what they're supposed to be funding. Might be worse than that, is what actually comes through. And that hurts in every other sense. I think the key thing that the taxpayer needs to know is Salina Public Schools has done an excellent job using the dollars that are available. There's been a lot of press the last couple of weeks about all the savings that have happened from the mill levies. I'm not sure if you read about that, but bond levy, thank you, I used the wrong term. $4 million in savings over the life of a 30-year bond because of how that was refinanced. And over the course of all, if I remember correctly, over the course of all the bonds that USD 305 has done over its history, this company has found ways to save something like $16 million while having quality facilities. I mean, it's important for our students to be able to have quality facilities here to go to school in, to play in, you know, the new softball fields, all that's part of the system. So I think I'm biased. Certainly, one of the good things about being on the board is I've had access to this budget for 4 years, but I feel really confident about the way dollars are being spent. I know my taxes gone up in my house this year because somebody decided my house is worth more, so I understand that side too, but those dollars that come in, I think are being shepherded wisely. And should folks have questions about that, let me know, we'll talk about it.
Well, we've hit about the halfway point of the first section here. This is where I'd like to turn it over to you, the citizen. And I want to share something with you real quick. I heard from a talk show host a couple of weeks ago. There's two types of people in this country today. There's a consumer, and she plays the hits 6 to 9. Yeah, my time's up, okay. Well, I've been told that a lot. So there are two types of people in this country, a consumer and a citizen. You are all citizens because you're interested in what's going on. These folks up here are citizens because they want to run for a zero-paid job, and they catch crap all the time from talk show hosts and radio. So now what I would like to do is turn the floor over to you, and when you raise your hand, stand up, tell us who you are. Again, 30 seconds, please ask a question. Let's don't make a statement, let's don't filibuster. So anybody interested in asking a question? And all the bells and whistles. Is anybody interested in asking a question?
None. Let's go.
Okay, I know this fella right here. They will have 2 minutes to respond.
I'm State Representative Clark Sanders. There's been controversy in the last 2 or 3 years about books on the school library shelves. In fact, I think there's a list, if my information is correct, of about 30 books that are questionable in nature. How do you feel we're doing in Salina with the keeping appropriate books on the school library shelves?
Okay, again, you'll all have 2 minutes, up to 2 minutes.
We'll keep an eye on Carol here for that. Thank you, Clark. Appreciate the question. One of the really great things about any educational system is giving students access to literature. You have to be able to read, you have to be able to discern. We're all faced with things every day, especially with things beeping at us. I mean, we're all access to information. There's tons of information. We were talking beforehand about the good old days when my parents got a newspaper at home, and that was the only source of information, was that one public newspaper. Now we get information from everywhere. I think a key thing that we can do in our public schools is help young people discern what they're reading. How do you make good quality decisions based on what's there? I personally, as some of you that followed things this last year, are aware, I'm not in favor of banning books for any reason. I am in favor of educating our librarians and our students and making sure that the things that are brought into the schools in the first place have value behind them. Your definition of value may not agree with mine, may not deal with the librarians, but we're trying to make good informed decisions about what's there. And the second thing beyond that, one of the things we did this last year during some of the contention that Clark alluded to was we as a school board made sure that parents have a right to come in and have a voice in what their students are reading. So without a doubt, any parent, they should be aware of this. If they're not, let me just state it here. They have access to check with librarians about what books their students are checking out. And when my sons were in school, I didn't care what they read. I want them to read. I want them to inform themselves and learn how to interpret that literature, whatever it might be. But as parents, they have the right to come in and pull those back out if they want to. So, great question. That's what I think on the matter. And I want people to read and be informed is what it comes down to.
Thank you. I agree with Mark. As a parent, it's my responsibility to educate my kid at home first. Okay, it's my responsibility to give my kids right from wrong, as I see it. Are they going to be perfect? No. But as long as I know that I raised them the right way, then I want to expose them so that we can have that conversation, so that I can tell you, okay, this is how dad, this is how mom sees that. Before you get out into the public eye and you hear what somebody else has to say, I think far too much we don't educate at home. We look and let somebody else do it, and then when they do it wrong, we want to get mad. I know at my church, you drop your kid off, that kid is mine now. And so if you haven't disciplined them, I'm going to correct it. And my opinion or my statement back to you is, if you won't raise your kid, I will. Otherwise, don't bring him here. And so I think that we have to do a better job of raising our kids ourselves instead of blaming somebody else for not raising them the way that we think they should be raised. So I really don't care what's in the school. I don't care what's on the library shelf, because I raised my kids. That is something you don't need to be reading. And I trust that when they get there, they will look at it like, no, I'm not interested in that. Are they going to always do that? No, they're not. But that doesn't mean that I don't want to expose them to that and then allow them to go to college and then get exposed to it and actually make their own decisions. So yes, let's have those conversations.
And much like Mark and Scott, I don't believe in the banning, because I don't think that solves the problem. I think if you have questionable material on the shelves for the students, it's condoning it, and condoning it's endorsing it. And so in that case, if it doesn't benefit the students, then it's money not spent wisely. And in that case, it goes back to the librarians. The librarians need to be educated, and they need to be judicious about how they curate their libraries. It's money on the taxpayers. So spending money that doesn't benefit the students or the families is unwise. So, and that's all.
So we had three book objections this year, 3 different people. Not one of them was the parent of children in our schools. And not one of them had read the book. It was the same book, All Boys Aren't Blue. But we had a policy already set up from the 80s that said what to do in a book objection. And so the first thing was to talk to the principal and the librarian at that school, and if they didn't agree with that, there was a committee from the school of faculty, the librarian, the principal, and some community people. And they all read the book. And the question was, is there enough social value or literary value, artistic value in this book that if there's some part of it that makes you cringe somewhat, which there was in this one, but is there enough other stuff that it's still worth having? And does it deal with an issue that some kids might need to know about? That each of the committees, then there was another committee from the other high school and more community people, and then there was the appeal to the board, and all of us read that book. And we all agreed that there was value in that book. And I was dismayed that the objectors hadn't read the book. They took a couple of pages that will make you cringe, and it's true it did. But they didn't read any of the rest of the book, as far as I could tell. And books are great things. I read some books in high school that were probably not quite appropriate to me, and it did not turn me into any kind of monster, I don't believe. But you got to read the whole book. Thank you.
Anybody else would like to ask a question? Okay, go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, since we got on this topic, I'm glad we did. And Clark, thank you for bringing that up. The book that you talked about reading, you said you could not judge people as they couldn't judge the book without reading it. I read the pages you're talking about. I was so embarrassed. I read them in front of the commissioners and almost cried because I couldn't believe that book was in our library. I would like to know the value that you think was in that book, because, now wait just a minute.
Okay.
This book is not against, I'm not talking about gays and LGBT, I'm not talking about all that. This is a sexual book describing how to have a homosexual relationship. Now, if you think kids can find value in that, I don't know why. I wouldn't want them to even have something explicit to know that how a man and a woman have sex and go into that. When I went to school, and I know I loved growing up
Okay,
when I went to school.
can we,
Oh, okay.
So the book, I think it had like 200-300 pages, and that was about 2 of them.
No.
3 maybe. And the guy who wrote it had a rough experience growing up. He was gay. He knew that from a young age, and he had some abuse. But he had a wonderful family, and that is a large part of the book. How supportive his family was, and how he experienced life. On the playground, I mean, this was not sexual, you know, it was just his life. And he, you know, in his home, he had a wonderful home, and a wonderful grandmother, and lots of wonderful relatives, and all those are parts of the book. And you don't get that on those 3 pages. And that's only like 1% of the book, and 99% of the book was very, it was not cringe-worthy, it was genuinely heartwarming. And there are gay kids in our schools, and there are black kids. This was a black gay guy. And he didn't want other people in his situation to feel as alone as he did in their lives. And that was the value of that book.
I think it's that when you get to the point where it's subjective, where each person's going to have a different take on what they see in it, then it comes to a point where, again, we have to look back to erring on the side of safety. And in that case, the material to somebody may have some value, but the reality comes into we're about focusing on the majority of the students. And if we're opening up doors to questionable material in another place, then we are doing it across the board. So if we don't have adherence to any sort of objective standard, then I think we're doing wrong by them. And we're doing wrong by the investment in materials.
I don't really feel the question was directed to me, but I'll try to comment on it as best I can. I think everybody is going to have a different, or could have a different perspective on that particular book based upon the way you were raised. Okay? I have gays and lesbians in my family. My wife has it in her family. And so when I read the book, I'm like, I can relate to that. I've seen that. Okay? It's not that it should be, and I'm not telling anybody, you know, if you're gay, that's your business. I don't have a heaven or hell to put you in. But at the same token, I know that God loves everybody. And so I can't sit here and thumb my nose at you or put my nose in the air at you just because that's the sin that you have. I have my own sins. And sin is sin. Okay, the bottom line. It makes a difference. Yes, sins have different grades, but sin is sin. All have sinned, period. Okay? So just because your sin is homosexuality doesn't make me any better than you. And so the whole point is, I think we have to educate our kids. Sometimes we have to come back and educate our adults as to, okay, how do you want to live your life? And if you want to live your life that way, I can't do anything about it. And so it's not only that, it's in everything that we do. So I think it's all about the perspective that you've grown up with.
And for me, it comes back to not that one particular book. It comes back to all of us have different perceptions about anything. Once we start pulling one book from the shelf, it's never going to stop. Because somebody else, the person behind you, might ask a question about a different book, and a third book, and a 12th book, and all of a sudden we don't have any books in the library because somebody finds rejection about everything. I want to echo what Scott said in an earlier question about making sure that people have educational opportunities everywhere they are in the community, whether from their family, from their church, wherever it is that we interact with others, that we're giving education out there. I wanted my sons to benefit, and somebody, I can't remember who, somebody said this earlier, I want my sons to benefit from reading things first, as opposed to experience it somewhere later on. If I had a son who was gay, I'd rather them read about that experience than finding out about it the first time the hard way. So I guess I declined to answer your question about the specific book, although I can't top anything Ann said. I think she gave a great answer to the question of that specific book. But I'm just not going to pull any book from the library for any reason.
Pornography?
Okay, we have about 10 minutes left in this section with the school
Randy, there was
board.
a question back there. Question.
Okay,
Maybe not a question, a statement?
questions only.
Well, my question then would be to Ann Zimmerman, to
Can
say,
you make it to all of them,
okay,
please?
to all of you, who said you had a select group who all read the entire book. I mean, was this select group a group that already was in favor of the book? Or how do you discriminate between those that had favor and those who weren't so much for the book? The book, bottom line, is pornography. That's what we're talking about here. Pornography.
So I'll answer for it, Ann, and for others on this as well. If you read the district policy on this, which again has been in place since, Ann said the 80s, it might have been earlier than that, I'm not sure, it's been around for a long time. But it starts out at the school building level. Anybody who wants to complain about a book at the individual level has the opportunity to go talk to the principal. If they're not met with satisfaction there, they can go to the next level. Just to cut to the chase, because I have 2 minutes, it winds up forming a committee at the school level, which is composed of, I don't remember the exact policy, but it's for sure the principal, 2 teachers, 2 members of the community, and again, it's by no means biased at that point. It's a group of people that are involved in this process. There's a decision made there. Then it goes to the district level, and that's chaired by, I can't remember her exact title, but Shanna Rector was the person who chaired it this time around. It goes through a process with district level people, with principals from different buildings, with teachers from different levels around, and community members involved in there as well. If there's a 3rd level needed, then it goes to the school board. And we go through the same type of process. So there's multiple people involved. I hadn't read the book in this particular case, the one you're asking about. I hadn't read it till it came to the school board level. And then I read it, and you've already heard my thoughts. So I'm not sure if anybody wants to add anything to that, but that's where the committee review comes from. Board policy, ultimately.
I had never read the book, so I didn't have an opinion on it. Even after I read it, would that be a book that I would read? No, have no interest in it. So they could sit there forever. I still wouldn't read it, but I read it because being on the board, that was my responsibility. So I did what I was supposed to do.
I have not read the book in its entirety, but I am familiar with a good bit of the portions that are in question. And I agree. I think it's a matter of morality and ethical spending of taxpayer dollars, and questionable of ethical library curation, because the schools are, that's not the place to be having our sexualities thrown out to them. They're going to find it on their own, and that's for the parents to discern, I think, in those cases. So I'll leave it at that.
There's a lot of sexuality on kids' phones and on the internet. And those are not things that their parents are reading. Their parents could read this book and they could discuss it afterwards. I would also say that there are plenty of things in the Bible that are not really appropriate for a lot of people. In fact, there are murders and who knows? I mean, kings killing the husband so they can have sex with the wife. These are things that are part of life, and kids are going to run across them. And it's better if they run across them in ways that are curated by adults, like the librarian or their parents. Those things they're going to run into sometime, and if they run into them on porn sites on their phone, then that's going to be probably a bigger problem than if they read them in a book from the library that they can discuss with their librarian or with their classmates. So I hope that some of you will read some of those books. There was a great one that the Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, I think. And it was a delightful book. It had a lot of, I don't know, there was one page maybe that somebody would have objected to, but I know that one of the sisters had a husband who's native, and I think that your husband would love that book. So, just, you might try reading some of those books that are on that list. And I think the list came from some unknown national source that we don't know who wrote that list. I don't know, I got a copy just because somebody was passing it around. And I started reading them, and they were some really good books. So, that's all. I guess I'll keep
Rosemary, we have about 5 minutes left, and we didn't say anything about a closing statement. Would it be okay if I allow them each a minute closing statement? Okay. Ann, would you like to have a minute closing statement, please?
So, I am having a great time being on the school board. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of meetings, it's a lot of reading. Every week you're reading dozens and hundreds of pages, but it seems really worthwhile. And I really want our schools to be great. I want our kids to be successful. I want our kids to be wise, the wisest 18-year-olds they can be when they get out of school, and to have a great life on the way up. I had a wonderful time in Salina Public Schools, and a great transformative education can just stretch minds, can stretch hearts, and can leave you with more wonder for life and wonder for the earth and the world. And that's what I want for our kids, to be full of wonder when they graduate and ready to discover more. Because you know that when you turn 18, you're not grown. You have a lot more growing to do. So that's what I want for our kids, is a transformational education.
I would like to make sure that if I get elected, that I'm able to do the things that I can do to impact our community in a positive manner. And I think the educational system is the heart of the community. And I think that that's one of the reasons it's driving me to run into this venture. And I want to be able to utilize all my skill sets, from my leadership in the Navy to my time as a student out here, as well as all my previous time going to the school system here, using things like Project Excel and various other programs that were going on there, and just take those things and put them back together, because I've seen other places around the nation and other places around the world, and while we're very sheltered here in Salina, there's a lot of other places that are a lot more rife than we are with problems. And I think that it's a matter of getting in here now and making sure we stand in the way.
There's only 95 shopping days to Christmas.
Sorry. It's my husband.
Scott, please don't take it personally.
He's got green on it.
Such is life. I've enjoyed being on the school board. I hope that you would re-elect me. It's an honor to do that for the community. But I think one of the biggest things about me is who I am is exactly who you've met. But when I sit on this board, it's not about me. It's not about my beliefs. It's about what's best for our kids and what's best for our community. And so there's been a lot of things that I voted for that me personally, Scott would not have done that, but because of what's necessary to move forward in the community, then I'm either behind it or I may be against it. But I have to do what's best for the community, not necessarily what Scott thinks is best.
As you heard earlier, I've spent most of my life involved in education in some way, shape, or form. But despite that, I have learned a tremendous amount the last 4 years. And part of the reason I'm running again is to try and keep on using some of that knowledge to help benefit our students and our families. Again, you're not always going to agree with me, and I'm not always going to agree with you, but I'm going to respect your opinion. I can assure you that even during the height of COVID, when we had so much controversy about masking, people disagreed with me, no doubt about it. But I respected your opinion. I wrote back to every single person who wrote to me, and I'm going to keep on doing that. So I feel like, similar to what Scott said, I put my heart and soul into this the last 4 years. I've read a tremendous amount of material, trying to help figure out what's best for our students and our teachers to help make this truly the best place to learn and to work. And I want to keep on trying to do that. So if you're so inclined to give me your vote, I appreciate it very much. I hope you'll email me or call me. The email and phone number have been on the district website for 4 years. They're still there. And happy to help answer questions if we can along the way. But again, I really want to close by thanking you all for having this and you all for being here. It's such a small segment of the population, but I appreciate you all being here and hope you'll tell your friends and neighbors to keep on being supportive of voting in general.
We're going to take about a 10-minute break now and then get the city commission candidates a chance to get up and stretch your legs, and we'll be back at 8 o'clock.